my name is Jacob Andrews. That's Brian back there manning the video camera. But this is our company, iVue. We founded actually going back to 2017. Long story somewhat short, and then I'll expand into more details. We started off really as a media company, and even though it didn't exist at the time, we then created a brand called iVue Media, because even though I wanted to start building our own drone hardware and software right from the start, didn't really have the capability to build our own drones, develop the software for them. So we used off-the-shelf drones to do media production jobs for like real estate listings, construction companies, businesses that are hosting events. And we found out that a lot of these media jobs that we're doing also require some sort of ground-based photography or videography. And we would get asked, well, how do you do this like real estate video tour in the house with a drone? It's like, oh, well, we actually don't necessarily use a drone for every job or as a part of every job. So that's why we created the name iVue Media, where may be hard to see down here. Our legal business name is Drones iVue Incorporated, and that's what we originally went under, and that's what caused some confusion going under the name of Drones iVue. But then fast forward a little while, we started iVue Robotics, which is our hardware division. That actually makes our develop air drones here, our first products in the market, if you will. Not really so much a product in the sense that you would like go buy off the shelf and expect anyone and everyone to be able to use it. Very much still a development platform, as you can kind of maybe imply by the name being develop air. And then what we'll get into towards the end is our software that we've really just launched in the last year, still in the very early stages. And you can kind of think about our software being like an operating system for drone operators, where right now the only application built out is our drone control application. We'll go into more detail there, but I really want to start doing more of an overview with Develop Air, our hardware. And hopefully get you guys more interested in not just operating drones, but actually building them, developing software for them, creating different payloads for them, or even learning just how to maintain and repair them. And I like to equate the stage that we're at in the drone industry really to both the early days of the personal computer industry, and then maybe even more so in this regard, the early days of the automotive industry. Back when people thought cars were toys for rich people in the early 1900s, they were really expensive. You had to be an enthusiast, and even more than being an enthusiast, you really had to be a mechanic. You had to know how to work on your own car. And that's something that we've kind of leapfrogged in the drone industry in some respects, because China, they have all the capability to produce the drones, but we really in this country just operate them. And so when you crash, one of those Chinese like DJI drones, you're really just sending it back to China. They may even just send you a replacement model. There are a few drone repair shops throughout the United States, but very few and far between. There was one guy that had a very prevalent drone repair shop here in the metro Atlanta area, doing really well for himself, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in business, just like really operating out of his house for the most part. And then I think he did finally get an office space around here. Unfortunately, that came to a somewhat short end, or a somewhat untimely end, at least for the time being, on a hiatus. He was actually found to be modifying some of those off-the-shelf flying camera drones to be used for delivering contraband into nearby prisons. And so it's very unclear, at least publicly, whether or not he knew he was doing those modifications for those uses, or they just kind of made him a fall guy, saying like, hey, you should know better to not like do what are legal modifications, but of course if you know how they're going to be used, that's aiding and abetting, right? But I say all that where there is a huge shortage of kind of technicians or repair people in the drone space, that if you're looking to start a career in the drone industry and you want to just start making money, learn how to solder and just start repairing drones. And there's plenty of YouTube content to get started, and you don't have to even take my word for it. Recently just went up to Ohio, recorded a podcast with a guy that I've known for close to a handful of years now, like 4 years or so. Started or really bought into a drone repair business for 10 tens of thousands of dollars at the most, maybe about $10,000, started working with this guy that had a drone repair shop out of Ohio called Ohio Drone Repair. Now they're, if not the largest drone repair organization in the US, definitely in the top 3. This kid's 24 years old and already has a multi-million-dollar business, right? And so it's not that there's maybe as much opportunity in that space as if like you're making your own drone product and looking to bring it out to the mass market of people that buy that same drone product 100 times, 100,000 times over, 1,000,000 times over. But again, it's kind of in the sense like if you're just interested in making money, go like start a pressure washing business or whatever, right? But if you still want to like get into the drone industry and make money with drones, repair business is the way to do it. And then you could also then branch into drone sales, not even like making your own drones, but just selling off-the-shelf drones that already exist. Really, right now, predominantly coming out from China and really predominantly DJI. But kind of going back to that analogy that I was using in the automotive industry, we're building drones that do require you, at least to some degree, to be a technician and maintain the drone, work on it, do repairs. And then, of course, we would like everyone that buys them and uses them to upgrade them with their own payloads, which I'll show off some of, and then potentially even making their own software applications as well. But realizing that we don't have the drone for anybody and everybody, we are trying to make Develop Air, our drones, more accessible even when they can't be purchased from us. We've made them all open source. So what that means is you can actually go to our website here, and in the download section, we have all the files available for our Develop Air. So you can actually look at all the components, download all the 3D print files, and actually build your own without having to buy it like pre-built from us. But the whole idea behind this is it's just a standard drone that here are all the electronics that go inside of it just to make it fly, and like using this GPS. If you have ever flown a DJI drone or seen like one of the more common drones out there, if you're flying it with a controller and just let go of it, it's just going to hover there in place. Same sort of concept applies to Develop Air. So it's easy to use in that regard once you get it off the ground. But a lot of the trouble that people have in adopting a drone is just getting them off the ground to begin with. So one of the initiatives that we've taken on to make Develop Air more approachable is allowing you to use any game controller. Using a computer just like this, and you can use a Windows computer, you can actually use like an Android phone as well. There's this software program called Q Ground Control. By a show of hands, out of curiosity, has anyone heard of Linux on a computer? So the Linux Foundation is a nonprofit organization that makes open source software for computers. So like this computer right here is running the Mac OS operating system. This computer runs both a version of Android as well as a version of Windows. Your phone will run, iPhones run iOS, another operating system. But the Linux Foundation, they create Linux for computers, but they also create this application called Q Ground Control. And so it's kind of like the Linux of the drone world, where it's very powerful software, but it's not very easy to use. And as one of our customers, we work with a college out of Elizabeth City, North Carolina, up along the Atlantic coast, just south of Virginia. And one of the students was like, this software is made by developers for developers. And I like to equate it like no one in this room would be using a personal computer on a day-to-day basis if we had to use Linux on it, right? Like I wouldn't even, right? That's just, given you can, technically speaking, do everything you would otherwise do on your computer running Windows or Mac OS, just not as easy to use, right? More of a technical learning curve required. So one of the downsides of software like this is you can get Develop Air off the ground pretty easily, but if you want to actually have your drone do anything like with a payload, right, This is one of our spotlight mod kits is what we call it. So you can tilt it up and down, as well as turn like the lights on and off, adjust the brightness of the lights, put the lights in a flashing mode. And then here's another example that will be maybe a little bit simpler for me to show off some of the limitations of this software. This is a dispenser mod kit, and so you can load it up just using like a typical like bottle cap opening system with like fish food, bird seed, small granular objects that you want to deploy from your drone. I always like to say, if you're a tool like me and you want to make it rain, you know, dropping money, you can do that too. But if I were to plug this into Develop Air, like using one of these back side plates, as easy as we've made that connection so you don't have to like run the cable through the inside of the drone to plug it in, the software doesn't know what you plugged in, and it doesn't even really know that you plugged anything in. You got to now go into the software and tell, hey, I just plugged in this mechanism and I use this port to plug it in, and now you have to like send some sort of command to then get this drawer, say to open, to drop the seeds, or hey, I've dropped enough seeds at this point on the map, now I want to close it back up until I get to the next point on the map, right? So let me show you a little bit of how that would be done using this software. So let's just say I'm taking off from this point down at the bottom of the field, and I want to fly up here to waypoint 2, and then here at waypoint 3, just above this tree, maybe I want to feed the birds that, you know, nest in that tree or something. So I am now going to create another waypoint, waypoint 4, and then from that drop down next to the waypoint label, we're going to select advanced, set servo. So now you can see waypoint 4 disappeared, and it just reverted its position back to waypoint 3, because now over there on the sidebar, we have this option to set servo, set a servo number, as well as a PWM number. So already there, it's like, what the heck? I don't want to do any of that just to tell that dispenser to open or tell it to close. Like, that's way too technically involved. But let me show you inside to show you what's actually going on here. I'm just going to unplug the GPS and the radio to make it a little bit easier to see. And by the way, for anyone that cares, this is the radio that's plugged in, just wrapped in heat shrink, and then that's the GPS up there in the top cover. And then this right here is what's called a flight controller. This specific brand, make, model is called the Pixhawk 6C. Using kind of computers as an analogy, this is like the processor, like the CPU, as well as the motherboard, kind of all built into one form factor. Now, it's not really capable enough to do a lot of processing other than the processing that's required to like keep the drone stable and level in flight. So if you were to attach like a camera to Develop Air, you can't use the processor on board to do like machine vision or object recognition, any of that sort of like follow me sort of functionality, but you can add other computers that then plug into this board or interface with this board if you want to do that, and I'll cover that in more detail a little bit later. But what I want to discuss right now in more detail are these PWM breakout boards. So you might have already seen there's 2 of them, and those are plugged into the bottom connectors. One says IO PWM out, and then the other one says FMU PWM out. And again, you don't really need to know what those stand for, but this first one that's plugged into IO PWM out has numbers labeling each connection 1 through 8, so there's 8 different connections available. Connections 1 through 4 are typically used for the motors. So, right, this being a quadcopter, you would have motor 1 connected to slot number 1, motor 2 connected to slot number 2, etc. And then therefore you really have connectors 5 through 8 available on this side, and then you have another board that's plugged into the FMU PWM out, and it's also labeled 1 through 8, but you actually have to think about this as 9 through 16. So basically with a quadcopter drone like this, you have let's see, 12 connectors made available to you, because the first 4 are taken up by the motors, and then you have 12 available for if you want to control a retractable landing gear, or you want to power like a companion computer or a camera or some of these other mod kits. Those are all plugged into those extra available slots, or at least by and large. And so, like I mentioned with our back sort of side plate system, typically you would have to like plug this in directly to one of these PWM breakout boards, but that's kind of a hassle if you're wanting to like quickly switch between payloads out in the field, if you're having to open up the top cover every time that you just want to swap out your payload. It's made less of a hassle where now we actually have top covers that latch on. Previously, and this was a huge pain in the butt, previously we had 8 screws that you actually had to take off to open up the top cover, and then 8 screws to put the top cover back on. So still DIY and upgradable, but less so out in the field, especially if you ever forget a screwdriver, which I never did. With these new side plates now, we actually have those already plugged in to this this FMU PWM breakout board, and you might be able to see that this connector over on the far left side for you guys is plugged into port number 8, which, as I discussed previously, is actually number 16. This one's number 15, this one's number 14, this one's number 13, right? That's already still too many numbers to keep up with, but that's to say, if I plug in this dispenser mod kit, right now it's already at a default of 1. So that means if I leave it as is, I'm actually going to send a signal to motor number 1, and depending on the signal I send to it, it's either going to speed up the motor, slow it down, completely stop it, and probably cause develop air to come crashing out of the sky, assuming I'm in flight when I send that command. And then this PWM value, this is also, again, way too technically complex for just being able to open a drawer or close a drawer, right? So this is not the actual value that these are set to, but let's say that this drawer closed right now is at a PWM value of 1,000. Then all the way open, that would be maybe a value of 2,000. And so if you wanted it halfway open, that would be a value of 1,500, right? So that's how you would be able to control this dispenser mod kit. Let's say I plug it into this far left one that we established as servo port number 16. I would go up here to servo, the entry field for the servo number, enter 16. And then I would say, at that waypoint 3, I want it opened, and I think I said that would be 2,000. And that's how I would then get the dispenser drawer to open at waypoint 3. Super easy, right? Something that anyone could do. And even if you didn't want to do that, right, if you had to do that, it's not something that anyone, a streamlined process that would make sense for people that even have to do a mission like this. So let me show you one other piece of software before I open up our own and show you how much easier we've made it. This is another program that's open source, kind of like Q Ground Control. And in the way that Linux, like the Linux Foundation, they make a standard version of Linux that they support by and large. But there's also, with it being open source, anyone can make their own version of Linux. And that's essentially what this software is. Like an individual guy went out, created this software. There's been other developers that have joined him over time. But as you can see, it looks like software developed in like the 80s before there's any real software. And again, I kind of like to equate like where we're at with Develop Air to those early days of the personal computer industry as well, where Develop Air is more of a drone of like, you buy it or you build it, and then what can you get it to do? Like, what are you going to attach to it? What sort of software are you going to write for it? Or maybe even with like some of the attachments that we have for it, how are you going to use it in a new, unique way, right? And that was kind of like the early days of computers, where it wasn't like you could just go buy a computer with a mouse, with an operating system, with games on it, with a word processor or spreadsheet software. Like all of that people had to create for then others to take advantage of. And that's in the spot that we're at in the drone industry, where Like there's very little just plug and play applications and payloads that you can go get for drones. Really the only exception is, the DJI sort of flying camera drones. If you want to take photos and videos, great, that's been figured out. But if you want to do anything else with a drone, no one has kind of made it streamlined in the way that, over the course of a decade or two, that really Apple and a few other companies were able to do for personal computers. But this software is actually a little bit more capable than Q ground control, but unfortunately is even less user-friendly. So this is one part that I'd like to show off here, where you can see on this left column here that there's numbers from 5 to 16. Any guesses for why numbers 1 through 4 are not listed there? What's that? Yep, so this is basically saying, hey, we don't trust the users of our software, they're too stupid, so we're just going to take out numbers 1 through 4 so you don't accidentally send a signal to the motor while it's in flight. But then you can see like these values 1800 and 1900, or 1100, 1900, 860, 1950. So you can adjust all those values to where, if let's say we wanted to use this dispenser mechanism, and I just use round numbers like 1,000 for closed, 2,000 to open, it actually really might be that this is like 870 closed, and then this is like all the way open, and it's like 1450 or something like that. So if I were to hit low in any of these, it would send that number on the left, and then if I were to send high, it would send that number on the right. So you got to kind of do setup or configuration to get your payloads to work in the way that you want them to. And I like to also kind of equate what USB did for computers for what we're doing with payloads for drones. Is you can take a keyboard, a mouse, a webcam, a solid state drive, fans, there's a lot of different USB devices out there now, and it's all just one connector, provides it power, provides it the data connectivity. You don't have to do any sort of like software setup or configuration. As soon as you plug it in, your computer knows exactly what you plugged in, and it just starts working, right? That doesn't exist with drones yet, but we're working on it. Actually, really quick before I get into that, I do want to cover one other element that I briefly mentioned already, using the game controller. So using Mission Planner or Q ground control, you can set up a game controller to fly, develop, air. But in Mission Planner, you can also control some of the payloads that you attach with your controller buttons as well. So for example, we put together a claw machine attachment, which we don't actually have the claw on it, but this is a winch, a servo-driven winch. So this can actually lower down a claw or a bucket if you want to like collect water samples as an example. And you can lower it down or raise it up just like you would at like a claw machine in an arcade, or for a claw machine in an arcade. But the way that Mission Planner allows you to set up controls, I may not show it all off, but do set servo, right? That's familiar from Q ground control. And now I can, I need to expand it over. Settings. And I don't know if we're going to get, there we go. So settings, now I can adjust the servo number and the PWM value that I want to send. But for the claw machine, because this is all the software supports, we set up L1, where you press L1 and that would lower the claw down. You press R1, that would raise the claw back up. And we set where you press triangle, it would stop the claw. So ideally, you could just have it to where as long as you're holding down L1, the claw is lowering down. As soon as you let go, the claw just stops. But Mission Planner doesn't allow you to configure buttons in that sort of way, right? And then same thing with the R1. If you're just to hold it down, it would raise up until you let go and then just stop. So triangle wouldn't even be required in an ideal world. And that's, again, part of what we're working on in our own software, just making it easier to use, even without a controller. So for the claw machine, instead of having to set like the PWM value for lower, the PWM value for raise, the PWM value for the neutral position so it's not moving up or down, we just have these buttons on screen that you can hold down the lower button. As long as you're holding down the lower button, the claw will lower. Same thing with raise. And then for the spotlight, there's actually 2 connections that are required. I think I might have highlighted this, but one's to control the vertical tilt up and down using that servo, and that's coming from this wire. And then there's this wire that controls the electronics or the lights. And so again, instead of having to figure out all the PWM values and the servo numbers, you just select the port that you plugged each one into. Given these are white side plates, now all of our develop air are red. That needs to be updated still. And then if you were to turn on the light, you have a slider, not just to tilt up and down the light, but you can also adjust the brightness, and then you can also put it in a flashing mode as well. So again, it's not like we're really inventing the drone. We're not inventing any of these new types of payloads or whatever. It's just how can we refine it so that everyday person can take advantage of it, and really working towards a future where every household, every business can own their own drone, where you guys have probably seen like delivery drones being used by companies like Amazon, FedEx, UPS, Walmart, etc. And they're operating fleets of drones, right? And I think that will always happen in the same way we have like Uber and taxi services and transportation services. But what makes the most sense for me is there's already more than 1 million people out there in the United States that will spend $1,000, a couple $1,000s or more on a drone that all it does is take photos and videos. To me, it makes a lot more sense to have a drone that can do your own personal deliveries as well as take your own photos or videos, help you water your garden, fertilize your yard, send your kids to go outside and play laser tag with it, and it become more of a personal computer everyday sort of platform, right? And again, just thinking about the delivery aspect, this is something that really even people in the drone industry that I talk to are like, oh my God, I've never heard of anyone think about drones being used in this way. Is you set your drone out in the front yard, you send it to the local Amazon locker, fast food, restaurant, retail store, and now instead of spending $3, $5, $10 anytime you want something delivered to you, right? You just have your one-time purchase of your drone that you send out to the nearby restaurant or store. And that's really not all that different than just curbside pickup, right? But instead of sending a person to go pick it up on your behalf or going yourself, right? Why not just send a drone on your behalf? And even just in the perspective of if you live in like a neighborhood and you're making breakfast or dinner or whatever, I just need a couple eggs, a piece of bread or whatever the case, sending your drone over to your neighbor, right? But right now, all that's really technically speaking illegal, because if you've learned any about the drone regulations up to this point, under Part 107, you can get a waiver to operate a drone beyond visual line of sight. So in other words, you always have to keep your drone within your own line of sight. And then there's new regulations coming out called Part 108, which makes it so these businesses or really large enterprises and government agencies will be able to operate beyond visual line of sight more without having to go through the waiver process. But neither of those addresses the everyday person that can't operate a drone for any sort of real utility, right? And I got into an conversation with a local drone operator that's worked with us to some degree, big fan of what we're doing, but was kind of pushing back on the whole idea of, well, if a drone's providing utility, isn't that a commercial operation? And I look at it in this way: if you get in your car to drive to the grocery store to pick up your groceries, that's providing utility to you, but it's not a commercial operation. And to me, that should also apply to drones, where there is no legal pathway for you to operate a drone in that context. Under the current regulations and even under the new regulations. You would literally, if you wanted to use a drone personally that way, you would have to start a company and then either go through the waiver process now or become a large enterprise that has the right connections with the right people. And so as much as we're focused on building the technology to make drones easy to use and approachable to everyone, a big part of my job is evangelizing drones being used in this way, and especially through political channels to make it legally possible. So I think the laws will change anyway, just because as we continue to make this technology easier to use, more valuable to the everyday person, either the FAA is going to have to put hundreds of thousands or millions of people in jail, which they can't already enforce the laws at the scale drones are being operated at today. So good luck with that, or they'll just have to adapt with it. But hopefully getting them to take more of a proactive approach, because right now with the way that the industry is being regulated, imagine the automotive industry when it was developed here in the United States by and large back in the early 1900s. The only everyone drove here pretty much, or maybe carpooled with someone else to get here. Did anyone take a bus to get here? Okay, so this is exactly to my point then. The only way that you can experience drones, as I was talking about, for any sort of real utility, especially beyond visual line of sight, is through an enterprise or government agency. And that's if the automotive industry got built out with all these same sort of regulations on the front end, to where we could only use a car and own a car, or really use a car if we were taking public transportation, via a bus, or if we were paying for a ride-sharing service, through a taxi company or an Uber sort of service, right? And that's how the drone industry is being regulated right now, to where no one would be able to own their own cars and operate their own cars. And that's, again, technically speaking, you can own your own drone, you can operate your own drone, but always has to be within your visual line of sight. So technically FPV drone flying, that's illegal right now, even though, again, that's not really enforced in the way that, by the letter of the law it should be. And then even like I was mentioning, with beyond visual line of sight, that's more than just these delivery missions. I mean, if anyone's ever done a photography, videography mission, chances are the drone's leaving your sight, for a few seconds at a time, even, a couple minutes at a time. And it just, to me, we're kind of making criminals out of otherwise law-abiding citizens, to where, let's just say in one of these hypothetical delivery missions, I were to send just my drone from actually my parents' house to the house right across the street, but I'm inside not watching the drone, and the drone falls out of the sky, lands on someone, kills them. We already have manslaughter as a law, right? Charge me with manslaughter. We don't need to make it illegal just for me going to pick up a couple eggs or a cup of flour or whatever from my neighbor, right? But unfortunately, that's how the industry is regulated right now. So I'll get off my soapbox unless anyone has any other questions about that. But otherwise, I did want to cover a little bit more of our software, especially where we're making improvements above and beyond Q ground control and mission planner. One of the kind of more rudimentary improvements, but makes a big deal. As you can see, I was just able to zoom in to this developer's location on the map using this little zoom in icon. But Q ground control or mission planner doesn't have anything like that, to where you could set a default location for where you want to create a waypoint mission. So what you would have to do is, let's say I wanted to actually create a mission down here where we're at. I might be able to see, our computer here. So here, our software, you can actually just zoom into your location, and it's as easy as that. Or we have a search bar, so kind of like Google Maps, doesn't look quite as nice as Google Maps, but you could also enter in an address. And so zoom into my parents' house, and now I could go create a mission out there without having to be there at the time. Where in Q ground control or mission planner, you would either have to just know where you're gonna go create a mission ahead of time, and be able to navigate the map and zoom into that spot, which can take many minutes of time, especially if you're out of state preparing to do a mission out of state. Or you can enter in the GPS coordinates, which I think we do have that ability as well. Not that anyone would want to actually type in GPS coordinates, take those from Google Map, convert them to like the right coordinate system that those other two programs, Ground Control and Mission Planner, use. But you could, technically speaking, also zoom into a spot on the map that way. But just making it a lot easier to get your mission planned. Right now, all we have the ability to do is search for locations. But what we're working towards, has anyone seen a drone do a mapping mission or done a mapping mission with a drone? So let's say we wanted our develop air with a camera that we have attached to it, map out at least most of this drone park. We'll start up at this waypoint 5 and at this waypoint number 36. And develop air would just automatically follow along this line, taking photos at intervals along the line. And it would take about 48 photos to map out that area. So now let's say this was like a neighborhood, right? And like from a consumer perspective, my dog got out of the yard and this is my neighborhood. So in addition to, or instead of like getting in your car, driving around the neighborhood looking for Digby in my case, you could send up your drone and then have it with the search bar, type in dog, and then have it automatically search that area anywhere it detects a dog, putting pins on the map for where a dog is detected, and then having like in a similar sort of window like this, having a list view. So I don't know if you've ever like looked at Zillow or whatever, and you can see the house locations on the map as well as, you know, in the list view, similar to that sort of look. And then having like a reverse image search. So, hey, there's a lot of people with dogs in my neighborhood. I don't want to be notified wherever my drone sees any dog. I want it to search for my specific dog, right? So being able to upload a photo of your specific dog to essentially do a reverse image search. But Jacob, I thought you said this computer doesn't have enough processing capability to do something like that. And you would be right in that observation. So you would either need to attach another like processor, like a Raspberry Pi, or, you know, they're big in the news right now, NVIDIA. They make graphics cards, of course, a lot for, you know, AI, crypto, gaming, but also a lot for machine vision or object detection. So you can attach one of those to develop air, not even be connected to the internet, and do a real-time search that way. But even better yet, kind of like your phone or your computer, as long as you're connected to the internet, you can access like the Google Cloud, the Amazon Cloud, the Microsoft Cloud, Oracle, whatever, and you get access to all of their computing almost real time, right? Because you're connected to all those servers or computers via the internet. And I like to equate this to where like most people are like, why would I ever want a drone, let alone why would I want a drone connected to the internet, right? But it's kind of like a smartphone. It's like you can use your smartphone just on Wi-Fi, right? But it gets a lot more value when you have a SIM card with a data plan that you can start to use it pretty much anywhere, right? And that's the same thing with a drone. You get a limited range and limited connection to control it or monitor it when you have a data plan with a SIM card, right? And then thinking about how a data plan with a SIM card or an internet connection would be used in this case, now you don't have to have an onboard processor and the drone's flying just with a camera on board, taking those photos and then sending them up to like an AWS server or, you know, whatever, and doing all that search real time without having to do any of the computing or processing on board the drone. And I like to use that example from the consumer perspective, because if you take that exact same sort of real-time search use case, you could also apply it for a commercial operation or commercial operations. One that we've done to a lesser degree, but using our dispenser mechanism, we went up to Charleston, South Carolina, worked with a farm that plants sea bean seeds, grows sea beans. It's like some vegan superfood. And typically they have to take a boat out to these marsh islands off the coast of Charleston, and then they have like a bag, like a big like gallon-sized Ziploc bag of seed, and they'll like just go like dispensing it by hand, you know, once they get out to like these little islands that they plant the sea beans at. And so we were able to actually, before we had our own software, use Ground Control to do exactly what I was mentioning before, where we would just say at that waypoint 3, we want to open up the dispenser mechanism and drop seeds there. what would be a lot better is, hey, let's just go map out this whole island with the drone, and then using object detection or machine vision, actually the drone could then decide these are all the best spots to plant the seeds, and then either part of that same mission if the dispenser is already attached, or as soon as that mapping mission is finished, attach to the dispenser, and then the drone could automatically then go dispense seeds at all those locations it identified. Another example for that in a commercial setting would be roofing, right? So now I could go map out a whole neighborhood of roofs, like one like this, and just tell I want to search for damage, roof damage within this area on the map, and then same thing, drop pins anywhere that there's roof damage detected. And I like to use from like a business case how this can make sense for roofing companies. A neighborhood with like an HOA, I would imagine a neighborhood like that has an HOA, has like a trash collection service, and all the residents in that neighborhood will get like a bulk discount, like 10% off or whatever, because everyone in that neighborhood uses the same trash service. I think the same thing could be done with roofing replacements, even if it's done on the insurance company side, where there's actually cases where insurance companies will give you like 5% off your home insurance premium if you have a Ring video doorbell or something along those lines. So I think that's a pretty cool example. And then lastly, from like the law enforcement perspective, which isn't really commercial, having every police officer that has a drone that they can send up in the case of like an Amber Alert. There's a gray Honda Accord, and they just send up their drone each within like a 2 square mile area or whatever, map it out, and then in the search bar enter in gray Honda Accord or gray Honda Accord with XYZ license plate or whatever, right? If you want to get more granular. And then the other system that kind of ties into that, as much as I've shown off some of our more basic mod kits here, we do have some weather monitoring mod kits in development. Well, this one's in development. This one has been previously developed. And then we also have a laser tag system that we're developing. So I mentioned that as like one of the applications and the way that a household, mom and dad may use the drone for doing deliveries, taking care of the yard, etc. But they're sick and tired of little Johnny, playing Fortnite or whatever inside all day. So it's like, go play laser tag, with the drone. It's not doing any deliveries or whatever, right? Something like that requires like the machine vision object detection that I was talking about for those sort of mapping missions. So a lot of the R&D that we're doing has very widespread application, and that's what we're trying to get across is like drones aren't just for photographers and videographers, for farmers, for these delivery businesses. They really will be for anybody and everybody. It's just people have to make them easy to use and approachable for the masses. And before I kind of open up to more questions, assuming you guys have any, I do want to go back and show you a little bit more about how we may be able to work together now or in the shorter term, should you not be interested in any of the sort of like technical development. Again, mentioned this at the beginning. We started iVue Media. It's essentially an Uber sort of business model. If you're into photography, videography, especially if you already have a Part 107 and you're looking to kind of be a one size fits all, one-stop shop sort of content creator, oftentimes we'll have jobs that require photography, videography, and then some sort of drone operation as well. And it's just a lot better if we can send out one person to that job versus let's get a separate photographer, a separate videographer, and then a separate drone operator. Or sometimes we'll get a photographer and a videographer that's also a drone operator, or a videographer and then a photographer that's also a drone operator, right? So the more that you can kind of build up across the spectrum, the better. Not the spectrum I'm on, the acoustic one, but let's see, we have this new series that we created. Not all of it is drone related, but we did create a episode, our second episode of the 3 that are out right now. And I say episode, but they're all like 2.5 minutes long, like short form social media content. And this features develop air.
Hey, you tubies, it's your main man. Chinese is out here flying them electric birds, spying on the neighbor folks.
Damn it, baby, where are you going? I'm fixing supper. You know what, why don't you just go play video games with Mama's new boyfriend?
Sorry, baby. Man's gotta do what a man's gotta do. But I'll bring you back some of them electric birds to fry up for supper.
Oh, Lord have mercy, it's just one of them dang droids. You love them Star Wars movies.
All right, you tubies, let's roll.
Oh!
Plenty of my fellow Americans read way down and accept this invasion of Homeland Security. I sure as hell ain't. Check it out. The main man's about to go wide up on this rubber bird's feathery ass. Got her inside. On fire. Damn, you tubies. Your main man's down. SOS. Hey, hey.
What? I'm just fixing supper.
I'm gonna need you to take me to the hospital.
I can't believe you chasing after that damn droid. You could have gotten yourself killed. Now I can't tell if them sirens is the police or the EMTs.
Quit your fussing, baby. I'm talking to my loyal followers. Anyway, you tubies, you've been on another whirlwind adventure with your main man. Anywho, while them Chinese was spying on us, I'm at least glad that Mama's new boyfriend was able to entertain himself with a damn new video game.
And that's, of course, now that we're in the credits, but I always just like to point out, Develop Air made its acting debut as Chinese spy drone, so. If Develop Air can do it, you can do it too. No. But yeah, so I'm open to any questions beyond like the technical aspects of what I covered. If anyone's also interested in just getting into the business world, starting a business, more than happy to address any questions there as well. But yeah, or no? Any questions? I answered everything. Gave you all the information you could ever hope to have. All right. Well, one thing that people typically like seeing as well. This is one of the first payloads that we made for Develop Air. Actually, before it was even called Develop Air.
Don't go too high.
Voices of safety. Certainly not mine.
Thank you.
You guys did not see that. No. Yeah, so it's legal to build and sell a flamethrower, and it's legal to build and sell a drone, although it's actually more legal right now to build and sell a flamethrower than it is a drone, which is crazy. But yeah, the ATF doesn't regulate flamethrowers. They don't consider them as dangerous weapons. But the FAA, a bunch of safety pansies they are, they consider flamethrowers weapons when attached to a drone. And so we can't technically publish this publicly online unless we had $25,000 in our marketing budget to take the FAA fine. So this is all just AI generated, because this definitely won't go up online. This is a hypothetical AI generated flamethrower demonstration video. But yeah, this is something that we would like to refine more. We're actually working on a newer sprayer mod kit, which that's essentially all that is. It's a sprayer. We use a little fuel bottle tank, and then we pressurize the liquid inside of it with we pressurized it with a bike pump. So you just pressurize it up to 40 PSI in our case. That got about a 10-foot shot, for the first time, and then 4 to 6 feet on the second fire. But yeah, we're working on a much more refined version that we may then, create another version of the flamethrower out of. This was version 2, as I mentioned in the last class. Version 1 was actually too tall for the landing gear. And so you guys have probably seen people like take off drones from their hands or land them in their hands, done that numerous times before. I was like, nothing different, right? There's just a flamethrower attached to this one. What's the big deal? But me being the big brain genius that I am, jokes, I put on grilling gloves. I was like, if this is to catch fire, safety first, right? Or safety third, fourth, somewhere down the line. And so we actually went to go like test out that first version of the flamethrower, plugged in the battery, which just literally plugs in just like that. And the kerosene that we were using for this first one just started spraying while I was like holding it in my hand, away from me. I was like, oh, that's not ideal. Unplug it, it stopped spraying. And then had the engineers there with me take a look at the wiring. Oh, it looks all right. Let's try it again. Same thing, obviously, what's the cliche? Do the same thing, expect different results, definition of insanity, something like that. Definitely not insane. And then the third time, we like actually adjust the wiring to make it work in a different way that should also work. And this time it does work, but before I actually like triggered it on the controller, and the first two times, again, I didn't trigger, it just automatically started spraying the kerosene. This third time, it not only triggered the sprayer, but we took apart an electric lighter, like cigarette sort of lighter, and then brought like the two like strands out to like the front of the sprayer nozzle. And so when the kerosene shoots through the little electrical arc, that creates the fire that turns it into a flamethrower. So I was like holding it in my hand. It had started the electrical arc. And so if you guys are familiar with like Mario, the video game character with the fire flower, I just was like holding develop air like this, and it looked like I had the fire flower sort of power up. And Brian was manning a camera very similar to that one, and he decided it would be a good idea to run over with a fire extinguisher instead of get it all on video, which would have made for a great video. But unfortunately have none of that on video. We just have one like aftermath photo of all like the extinguishing or whatever it's called, on the ground. And then we actually, let me pull this up really quickly to give you guys a little visual of how jank it looked. Remote ignition device. Yeah, so this is it, not attached to develop air, but it's like all plastic, 3D printed plastic, and then acrylic or plexiglass, also plastic, held together with electrical tape with the kerosene bottle in the middle of it. And so that plastic had actually like melted like a pretty big hole, like just straight through. And I was like, man, these grilling gloves probably wouldn't have done much had that like canister like caught fire and blown up. So all in the sake of innovation, right? And kind of similarly, it wasn't until afterwards, hindsight being 2020, there's like kids just off camera. Again, hypothetical, this AI generated video, kids playing right off camera. And I was like, man, had anything gotten bad, that could have gotten really bad, but it didn't. So that's what matters, right? And then lastly, unless there's any other questions, this is something I was asked about in the last class that, again, just gets people thinking about drones of a little bit larger of a size. We were asked what's the largest scale project that we've worked on. Probably not quite financially, but definitely in size of the drone, the largest that we've worked on. This was a crop spraying drone. All those sprayers have since been taken off, and we modified it to deploy clam and oyster seeds, or like the larvae of clams and oysters, to do coastline restoration, predominantly on the coast of Florida. But he's the guy that actually owns the drone. He provides the service. We just did like all the technical modification work to make the motors spin, do all the electronics, do the software programming, and then just showing him how to use that Q ground control software, which, as I mentioned, you can still use for develop air. We have our own software that makes it easier to use, but we have customers that have $500,000 drones that they don't fly because the software is too technically complex. And they don't even fly sometimes even our drones. It's like, well, I don't want to learn how to fly a drone with this software that's too complex, especially if I crash it, the drone's $500,000, even a couple $1,000s, right? It's just a non-starter for a lot of people. So luckily we were able to help him work through the learning curve, and now he's up and operational. But we did have a couple close calls with this, again, hypothetically speaking. But it's a lot more forgiving working with a drone like the size of Develop Air, even though these props can still hurt. Don't ask me how I know. They definitely don't draw blood. But these props, being a quadcopter, are a lot more susceptible to being put on the wrong motor. And then if you put them on the wrong motor on a quadcopter, the drone will basically like just take off if you're lucky, or unlucky depending on how you look at it, and then like flop over pretty much immediately. If you get like 2 of the 8 props on the wrong motors, it will still take off. It'll just be the scariest sight and sound that you've ever seen, like 6 feet away from you, like this mini helicopter-sized drone just like oscillating back and forth. Got it back to the ground. Luckily, no one was injured, or the drone, made it back down in one piece. And then kind of like a DJI drone with Develop Air, if you're flying with a controller, just let go of the controls. It'll just hover there in place, waiting for your next input. That's how that drone is predominantly set up as well. But we were helping him adjust the settings on his controller, like the switches on his controller. And lo and behold, I was flying it out at our local drone park, and I'm like telling it to take off and like go to let go to just hover in place. And again, it's like the sound of like a small helicopter. I mean, it's much louder than, these smaller drones the size of Develop Air. And all of a sudden, you just hear this helicopter noise and then complete silence, while the drone's still. And I was like, that's not when you want to hear complete silence, because, the drone was essentially starting to fall out of the sky from about 15, 20 feet up. And, in the best case scenario, that drone would have been destroyed. We would have been bankrupt as a company, and that would have been a real nice ride. But more likely, all that debris would have scattered. We would have all been maimed to some degree, and then potentially even killed. But luckily, noticed that it was not receiving any more throttle input, and like a handful of feet off the ground, able to get it back up in the sky and then hovering in place as it should. So it's a lot more forgiving, again, to work with drones like Develop Air, even though there still are challenges, again, as I talked about, technically speaking. And then again, they still are aircraft or vehicles. They're not toys. As much as people like to say, oh, you get to work with toys all day. Just wait. We'll all rely on these soon enough, and they won't be looked at as toys anymore. Well, I guess cars are still somewhat looked at as toys, but in any case, any questions, comments? I can drone on all day. Don't make me.
We appreciate you coming by. I know you got to hit the road. You got to get going here, but
I'm more than happy. Again, any questions as you have any? I won't bite. And if you come up with any, Robin has my contact info. We're pretty easy to find online. More than happy to do flight demos out at our local drone park. Next time we come down, also do flight demos as well. So, yeah, I'm available. Should I be of any help to you guys, feel free to reach out.
give them a golf clap.
I prefer snaps. No.
Or a snap. Thanks.
Thank you all.
All right. Don't forget, Friday night, midnight.